Uh, Virgo, your name is in a room right now, not your face, not your presence. Your name, uh, spoken by someone who had been holding it like something hot and finally put it down in front of the wrong person or the right person. So, depending on what comes next, uh, and the question isn't whether it happened. Um, the question is what you do now before it reaches you directly, before the ripple becomes a wave with the information that something is moving through spaces you weren't monitoring. Let's start somewhere different than last time. Let's start with you, um, and the specific way you've been showing up lately. Because secrets don't get confessed about people who aren't doing something. They get confessed about people who are moving, growing, um, becoming visible in ways that produce reactions in the people around them. Reactions that can't always find their proper form. And so they come out sideways as confessions, um, as secrets released into the wrong hands, um, as someone else's discomfort with your trajectory dressed up as honesty. What have you been doing lately uh, that someone needed to respond to? Not what did you do wrong? What have you been doing right that made someone else feel the need to say your name in a room you weren't in? Because that distinction between someone responding to your wrongdoing and someone responding to your rising changes everything about how you navigate what's coming. Uh, the secret. Let's talk about its anatomy because secrets, the kind that get confessed, have a specific structure. Um, they contain truth mixed with framing, and framing, uh, not the truth itself, but the frame around it, is where the danger lives. Um, because the same fact, identical, word for word, um, lands completely differently depending on the frame applied to it. Um, Context added or removed, emphasis shifted slightly. The version of you present in the telling, the motive assigned to your behavior, the interpretation placed on your choices, um, shaped by whoever is doing the telling. And whoever is doing the telling has their own agenda, always, um, even when the agenda is unconscious. Even when the person genuinely believes they're just saying what's true, the frame is never neutral. And the frame is what traveled uh, along with whatever truth was in the confession into the room you weren't in. And the frame, not the truth, um, is what you're actually dealing with. So the first move before anything else, um, is separating the fact from the frame. Um, what is actually true in the cleanest, most honest, most context complete version, and what is the interpretation placed on it by someone who had reasons, conscious or not, um, to shape it a certain way. Name the fact separately from the frame. Um, because your response, when the time comes for one, uh, should address the fact, not the frame. Um, responding to the frame gives it legitimacy. Responding to the fact clearly, without drama, with full command of the actual story, dissolves the frame entirely. This reflection invites you to consider, what is the fact at the center of this, stripped of everything? No interpretation, no assigned motive, no narrative built around it. Just the thing that happened or didn't happen that is now being circulated in someone else's framing. Can you state it in one sentence? Clean and simple. Because if you can hold the actual fact that cleanly, nobody else's version of it has more authority than yours. And authority in situations like this belongs to whoever holds their story most clearly, not loudest, clearest. Now, the shocking part. Because shocking in this context means one of two things. Either the secret reveals something about you, something real, something true, something that you'd have preferred to control the narrative around, that is now out before you were ready, before you had the chance to contextualize it yourself, before you could be the one to say it first, in your own words, with your own framing, with the full picture intact. Uh, or, uh, and this version requires its own kind of response. The secret reveals something about the person who confessed it, something about their relationship to you, their feelings hidden, complex, possibly not even fully understood by themselves, that spilled out in the form of a confession about you. Because sometimes the things people say about others are really just things they needed to say about themselves. And your name was the closest available vehicle. Which version is this? Because they require completely different responses. And conflating them, responding to the second version as if it's the first, gives something power it doesn't actually have. While responding to the first version as if it's the second underestimates something that deserves more attention. Know which one you're dealing with. Before you move, here's the thing about danger. Real danger, the kind worth taking seriously, requires three conditions to exist simultaneously: a threat, vulnerability to that threat, um, and a window of time in which the threat can do damage. Remove any one of those, and the danger shrinks significantly. The threat, the confession, the secret, the information in someone else's hands, you can't retroactively remove. It's out. That ship has sailed. Trying to unrelease information is one of the least efficient uses of energy available. Leave it. But the vulnerability, your exposure to the threat that you can address by getting ahead of the narrative where possible, uh, not defensively, proactively, um, by being the one who speaks to the people who matter before the confession reaches them in someone else's framing, um, by owning the story in the rooms where ownership matters. Not every room, uh, the right rooms, the ones where your reputation, your relationships, your standing actually live, and the window, the time in which the damage can happen, um, closes faster than you think. Information has a half life, especially in the era we're living in, where the next thing is always arriving to displace the current thing. Um, the confession that feels massive today, uh, in 3 weeks, is old news, even to the people who heard it, um, especially to the people who heard it, because people's attention moves on faster than it feels like it will when you're standing at the center of something. Uh, the window is smaller than your fear is making it feel. Act within it precisely, strategically, without panic, and the danger shrinks to something manageable, uh, something survivable, something that in 6 months you'll look back on as the thing that didn't stop you, uh, because you didn't let it. This reflection invites you to consider: who are the three people whose perception of you actually matters in this situation? Not everyone who might hear the confession, not the peripheral people, the barely connected people, the people whose opinion of you has no real bearing on your life. The three or two or five whose perception actually affects something real, um, a professional relationship, a deep friendship, a family dynamic, something with stakes. Because managing the narrative with those specific people intentionally, clearly, before the confession reaches them in distorted form is the entire game. Everything else is noise. Focus on the game. Ignore the noise. Now, the part of this that nobody wants to examine, but that this reading would be dishonest to skip. the person who confessed, uh, who are they to you? Well, not what are they doing, who are they? Because confessions about people, uh, the kind that carry this kind of charge, don't usually come from strangers. They come from people who are close enough to know the thing being confessed, um, which means someone inside your circle, someone you trusted with information, consciously or by proximity, um, that has now moved. And the question that needs to be asked, honestly, without defensiveness, is whether you saw this coming. Um, Not the confession specifically, the capacity for it, um, the specific quality of this person, uh, in how they've handled information before, in how they respond when they feel something they can't directly address, in whether their loyalty has always been as solid as you assumed, that might have been visible earlier, um, in smaller ways, um, that you possibly noticed and filed away without acting on. Because the circle audit, the honest examination of who is actually in it and whether they've earned their position, is the most important thing the situation is asking you to do. Not as punishment, as maintenance, um, the kind that should happen regularly and tends not to until something like this forces it. Um, who actually belongs in your inner circle, who has demonstrated through actual behavior, not just loyalty claimed, that they can hold what you give them, and who has been in the circle by habit rather than by merit, by history rather than by current trustworthiness, by the fact that removing them would require a conversation, um, that you've been postponing, um, rather than by the fact that they've actually earned their place. This situation is doing the audit for you, um, painfully, um, inconveniently, but accurately, and the information it's producing, um, about who can be trusted with the real you, is worth more than the discomfort of receiving it this way. This reflection invites you to consider, after this, what changes about how you share yourself, not becoming closed, um, not building a fortress, um, but becoming more intentional, more selective, more willing to let the track record speak before extending access, um, rather than extending access and hoping the track record follows. Because trust given in advance, rather than trust earned over time, is what creates the conditions for situations exactly like this one. And if this situation teaches you that actually teaches you, changes your behavior rather than just confirming a belief, then it has given you something, despite the cost of giving it. Um, One more thing, and this is the thing that matters most. Underneath the strategy and the circle audit and the narrative management, um, you are not diminished by this. Whatever was said, um, however it was framed, however far it traveled, does not change what you actually are, does not alter the substance of your character, does not make you less capable or less worthy or less deserving of the life you're building, um, than you were before someone said your name in a room you weren't in. Other people's narratives about you, however confidently delivered, um, are not your identity. Um, they're just stories. Um, and stories, when they meet the actual person they're about, um, consistently, clearly, without drama or defensiveness, lose their authority. Because the real thing, present and grounded and unhurried, um, always outweighs the story about it. Always. Given enough time. Given enough of you just being who you actually are, um, be that consistently, without performance, without the desperate need to correct every person who heard the wrong version. Um, just be the real version. Loudly enough, consistently enough, long enough that the story dissolves on contact with you. Um, that's the most powerful response available. Not a rebuttal, not a counter narrative, just you. Um, Showing up as yourself continuously without shrinking, without the confession having changed who that is. The power is yours. It always has been. Someone said your name in a room you weren't in, and now you know. Uh, and knowing, uh, however uncomfortable the knowing is always better than not knowing, because not knowing produces passivity. Mm? And knowing, uh, even uncomfortable knowing, produces the possibility of a response. Um, Respond strategically, calmly, from the ground, um, as the person who, whatever someone just said about you, knows exactly who they are and is not available to be redefined by someone else's confession. Um, Not now, not ever. Take what resonates, softly release the rest. Trust yourself. Tell me in the comments, when someone reveals something about you without your permission, what's your first instinct? Defend, withdraw, or something else entirely? Drop it below. And have you ever realized someone in your circle wasn't who you thought they were? What was the moment you knew? Tell me. That's everything today. Do the circle audit um, quietly, honestly, without drama, and then tighten who gets access to the real you. Not because you're closing, um, because you're choosing. There's a difference, a significant one.